Except we're going to be live. Boom, boom, bam. There we are.
Yeah, there we are.
Tim and I were backstage talking for like 15 minutes, and we're like, you know what? We probably should have just saved this for when we came out here, but
yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
But you know, when you get a chance, when we talk, typically we're talking about fishing. So
yeah.
Not much different than what we're going to do tonight.
Right.
But we're just getting started. We got 4 people in there, and I'm sure a bunch will pop in as we get going. Uncle Jeep's out there saying, "Woo, I'm first. Wait, this is 2 stands. I need to be second, darn it." Then Chad's out there.
Uncle Jeep.
Shad did get second. Jason Lamb, how you doing? Palmetto Cats. Boom, boom, bam, we're live. That's right. Thank you.
So, Stan, I got I'm pretty sure that was Jason Lamb. There's it's kind of like a bar type. You can get food. It's kind of a I don't know, a destination point for travelers and stuff like that. It's called the Psycho Silo, believe it or not, and it's an old giant grain bin that sat off of the interstate, and it's been there since the 1880s or so. And they converted it into this cool thing where they have bands and they've got different things. They got an airplane hanging in there like an old like something you'd think that Indiana Jones would have crashed. I mean, they've got motorcycle stuff and stuff. So anyway, I was up there on the top deck and we were eating some food, my wife and I. And all of a sudden, somebody comes up and it was Jason Lent. He says, "Hey, aren't you Epic Catfish?" I looked around and said, "Yeah." But it was really cool talking to him and meeting some people. It is a very small world out there.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
Mm-hmm.
We got there was Jason Lamb, Palmetto Cats, Creole Catfishing. Yes, need some more epic teachings in my life. We got Jeff Beal, fishing with Jeff Beal. I don't know if Sean told you about winning a T-shirt, but that's who he won the T-shirt off of.
He did tell me about that.
Let's see. Fishing for Whiskers. Rhonda, how you doing? Good to see you. I think this is the closest to on time you've been, Stan. Howdy and Merry Christmas. We got Chucky out there. Dave G. James Albaugh, how are you?
What up, James?
Dragonfire. And we're pretty much caught up. And first of all, Palmetto had a great show the other night. Had Dieter Melhorn, Chris Flores, and Joe from Chat Cats on there talking about what it's like to be a guide. So,
yeah,
pretty interesting stuff. Definitely. If you missed the show, definitely something to go back and check out on Palmetto Cats. But we are going to get started. And the one thing, of course, it's going to turn into questions and all that. But one of the things that wanted to talk about, kind of based on what's happening right now, and of course, it's maybe not going to be the best of news, but when there's the situations like you have a major cold front that runs through, and right now it's 90% of the country is under that major cold front.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, that's going to affect the fish. And
it does. It definitely affects the fish, especially with something so much more. Like if you were running 40s before this weekend, and all of a sudden you got -9 or -6 or -2, that puts a deep freeze on that stuff. When the sun's not shining, that water temperature plummets like nobody's business. And, fish that normally would have been shallow, especially shad. Now, the one thing that if you're in a kind of a temperate zone like you are, and a lot of the part of the country is, like Tennessee and all that stuff, shad sometimes will get caught up shallow and basically get winter killed because it shocks their central nervous system and they don't really swim anymore. And we all know that shad they never stop swimming. They don't just sit there ever. So they have to have water flowing over their gills. So yeah, that could create a gigantic winter kill. And then once that water warms back up again, there could be all kinds of big catfish that frequent shallows eating on those winter killed shad. I mean, we hear about it in lakes, especially things like Santee Cooper. You hear about it in rivers, the Tennessee and the Kentucky and the Illinois and the Mississippi. After all,
And so, for people out there that are still going to go out fishing, uh, what's something? So we were talking about, like the fish being up in the shallows, because that's what we were experiencing here. Was out. We did stand day last Sunday with Dustin from Team Snag and Whiskers. And speaking of that, there's Team Snag and Whiskers Sean out there. But we took Dustin upriver, up into the city. He'd never really fished up there before. And he caught his PB of 50, 53, 50. But
nice.
we were fishing just down from the fall line in Richmond.
Nice.
Maybe 10 feet of water. But that was because of the flow. It was, perfect current conditions for up there. So, but we've been finding them in that 10-foot range and shallower even. So now when this hits, what can people, if they want to have a chance of trying to catch a fish, what do they got to try to do?
Well, if they're looking for a chance to catch a fish, you can do almost anything. You can throw shallow, you can throw mid-range, you can throw deep, especially on something, a river that's got a heavy population of catfish. Whether it's Santee Cooper, whether it's, the James, whether it's the Tennessee, it's heavy populations kind of open the door for a lot of that stuff. But if you're looking for just fish, yeah, throw almost any bait you want, throw it in varied conditions until in depths and currents until you find them. But if you're looking for big fish, I tend to look in deeper water, no matter what the time of year is. Now, maybe I've missed the boat a couple times, but deeper water where I fish and what I do and what I'm looking for. Hey, what's up, Steve Douglas?
Thank you for coming in, Steve.
And what I'm looking for, it pays me in big fish to fish at least semi-deep, and that means at least 15 to 20 foot, all the way down to 50, 60, 70, 80 foot. Now, I'm going to vary I'm going to try to get on spots that I can throw on the same anchor, maybe 20 foot, and then maybe 30 foot, and then maybe 45, maybe 50, and then out towards the main channel or something like that. I'm gonna test the waters. And like I said, Sean and I can talk about what we think is going to be the case, and a lot of times we're right, but there's sometimes that I have, I get an idea in mind of the pattern I want to do, and I get out there and the fish aren't telling me that I was right at all. So then I have to start over and say, okay, if they're not doing this, they're doing that. So I went from pattern A, what I thought pattern A was going to be, to pattern B. And if pattern B doesn't work out, then I got to go to pattern C. And, usually with blue cats on the Mississippi, I don't have to go all the way to pattern D and get into 3 foot of water. But I have heard of a lot of guys that are they're tournament guys, and they're guys that have a lot of experience, and they'll range everything from 50 foot deep to 1 and 2 foot of water, and they're going to be dragging and they're going to be bouncing, they're going to be doing all that stuff. And there's a reason for that, because they have to put fish in the boat. They're not just trying to get on a pattern, and I'm never trying to just catch one fish. I'm trying to catch a bunch of monsters. But sometimes we have failed at it. I mean, you only have so much time, you only have so much whatever, so I don't even get to the other patterns, but those guys move through them pretty quick. But then again, if that's what you're doing, if you're trying to put fish on the end of your line, you are better off in a tournament situation a lot of times to move. And back in the day when I was guiding, just like you were talking about with Palmetto, I mean, sometimes I do 50 anchors a day. Now, I don't even come close to that on the Mississippi, because I need a certain amount of time to make sure those monsters are biting. and to let them get used to that bait a little bit or get stirred up by that bait. And but with channel cats and smaller blues and flatheads and stuff like that, it's 10-15 minutes. You're throwing the best bait you got. You're move. You're maybe change some things around. And if fish aren't telling you something, it's either they're not biting or they're not there.
Wow. And boom, boom, bam. Thank you very much, Freddie. Thank you. Freddie with the 2022 Merry Christmas Eve. And Steve Douglas was saying, I hope everyone is awesome. Well, you know what? When we're sitting here talking catfish, we are always awesome.
Always.
And Tim, I'm glad you brought up the one thing, because I see a lot of times people get that kind of confused. There's when you're talking about certain things, obviously there's always variables and everything like that. But there's, you're going to fish flathead different than blues and channel cats. So catfish a lot of times get lumped together, but they're all very different. And also it's very different, just like you had said, going out to just catch fish.
Yep.
Whether it's eater size, whatever, they're definitely fishing that differently than if you're going out for, trophy catfish or the bigger fish. So I'm glad you brought that point up.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even take my two sons out on the water and fish like I normally like to fish, because those fish and the conditions were too rough for them at 9, 10, 11 years old. I mean, I had to wait till Connor was 12 before he could go to even Keokuk and battle a 60-pounder. And thank God I did, because if he would have experienced, got locked into a fish like that at 9, he probably would have said, oh, that's too much work for me. But, I had to wait, because so saying that, I had to tailor what I was wanting to go do every single time I took my kids. I had to say, okay, Tim, we're not trying to catch 80s, 90s, or 100s. We're trying to catch 10s, 15s, 20s, 30s. And so, yeah, it is a different way of fishing. But, no less fun when the point is to take people out and see their enjoyment, because not everybody likes that kind of rough work. I mean, a lot of guys like lighter weight rods, lighter line, and rods going down left and right, and they're reeling in fish. Nothing wrong with that.
That was one of the things that I was. That was one of the things that I was on Kevin's show when he was talking with Chris and Dieter and Joe, how everybody is a little different. So they were so caught up on, oh man, I got to get this big fish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we've talked about this before, Tim, where big is a relative term, where to somebody, a 15-pound blue cat can be a monster. That could be their biggest fish they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in, the first big catfish I caught here in the James was, believe it or not, a 22-pounder. And
I believe that.
That was a monster to me at that point. That kind of definitely hooked us into the big catfish. And now it's like, oh wow, check this out. It's another 60. You're excited.
Yeah.
But you're not even weighing, Stan 3 got that one in the kayak a week or two ago, and he knew it was more than 60 just by the position in his arms. He could feel.
Sure.
When I got a 60, normally this is up higher, and so now you're not even weighing 50s and 60s. So, but they were saying how they had to kind of take a step back and realize that not everybody's like that. Like, not everybody has experienced a bunch of 30s, 40s, 50s. So,
sure. And back when I used to guide, that was the first probably 10 minutes of the conversation when people would call me. I said, okay, what do you want to do? Not just what I do. Would you rather catch lots of channel cats between 5 and 15 pounds, and it's a beautiful thing? Do you want to catch flatheads? Do you want to catch numbers of flatheads? Do you want to go after big flatheads? Because now that's 3 separate trips and 3 different 3 different calendar situations. Or do you want to go after blues, and giant blues at that? Because I really didn't ever want to take anybody that far away to just go catch 15s, because it was a little too expensive for that. So I had to really kind of vet these guys to see where they wanted to go and what their experience level was. And it was always interesting. Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, getting Kevin sent me a funny little thing. And we got Cool Cats Fishing. Pontoon Jody's made it in there. There's Mark from Catfish and Crappie made it in. Robin C. We were talking about Creole brought up that Palmetto's Cajun accent is legit. And, now with the filet, he's hearing that in every random chats and stuff now. Now, when the Fish Guy Ranch, how you doing? When it gets cold like this, and do you believe that bait, size of bait, things like that, does it make a difference? Do you still throw what you normally throw, or
it seems to? I've thrown giant baits in the wintertime, and I've kind of proved that to be kind of, I wouldn't say fruitless. You can still catch a few, but by the time that water gets under 50 degrees, a bait the size of a catcher's mitt is really not probably what you want. I mean, I start going down to baits like half of a 6 or 8 inch gizzard shad, a moon eye that's really only 8 inches, and I start cutting them in half, and thanks, Steve. So, although I would love if they would act the way I want them to, I've always said, you got to listen to the fish. The fish will tell you what you need to do. You just can't be stubborn about it, because I went through a phase of where I wanted to catch fish the way it was told to me by people, or the way it was, I read an article in a magazine, and I wanted to be able to go catch fish the way that was. And I didn't really know that it could be different hour to hour. I didn't know at that point, because I didn't have enough experience on the water. But once I got enough experience on the water, I put the science together with it, and I'm like, oh, that really makes sense. The drop in water, the pH, the amount of daylight, once that whole, it's a giant puzzle. It's a giant puzzle. And anybody at home right now that is thinking, oh man, I should have known this. No. There's epiphany moments, and it comes from being completely crazy. I think I was completely crazy at one point, of which I was just like a mad scientist, and I've got to figure this out. And I thought it was maybe a 2-sided Rubik's Cube. It's about a 20-sided Rubik's Cube to really get that going. And I'm not always right either. As much time as I've spent on the water, as much as I have talked about it and thought about it and done studies and done all those crazy things, I can still go get stumped on the water. And that actually is what keeps me going, believe that or not. I mean, if I want it every single time, if I could just dance a jig after catching an 80 every hour that I go, I'd be like, that's not that awesome. But it's the bad times, it's the tough days, it's the days where you really got to figure it out. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of times when the fishing's tough and we still eke one out, or 2 or 3 even. Like, you might go 5 hours, 4 hours, and nobody sees me until I hit that button on the live. And I'm like, now we finally got them figured out, because we have struggled for 4 or 5 hours, and we've looked at 15 miles, and we've looked at it in really looked at it, and we've thrown baits, and they just won't pull a bait down. They'll go ponk, and then just sort of and then let it up. And I'm like, I hope this isn't going to happen after dark. And every once in a while, we talked about this before, every once in a while the bite is all day and the night bite's terrible, and it will flip-flop in just a day or so. And I'm always kind of worried about that, because most of the time when we leave, it takes us 4 hours to get there. We got to go do this, we got to go do that, And then we got to look, and then pretty soon it's an hour before dark, and I'm like, I hope it wasn't a day bite all day today.
Bill and Duke
That's
catfishing. I'm the best catfisherman in America. And Palmetto says, well, where'd it go? Confidence is key. Let's see. There was something. Stan 3 was asking, what river do you prefer to fish? One with a tide or not?
And he's asking me?
Yep.
It really doesn't matter to me as long as I'm focusing on current, and doesn't matter if it's going east or west, north or south. I've fished them all. As long as you basically you say, okay, the current's going towards the ocean right now, and then pretty soon it's going to dead stop and it's going to go upriver, fine. We actually have, and this is going to surprise some people, we do have situations where it's almost like tide, because we'll have a tributary river that normally flows out, and the main river comes up, and it'll actually backflow it for a day, almost a day sometimes. So normally you got a tributary river that's coming in, that's going east to west, emptying into the Mississippi. Mississippi comes up, and that whole region doesn't get any water in, so it's coming up, it'll reverse the flow. So yeah, I mean, even here I fish somewhat of a tidal situation every once in a while, especially in the spring. The other way happens too, where the main river will start dropping because they'll start releasing water down on the next one, dropping that pool, and then all of a sudden the tributary river that I'm fishing in May or June starts ripping. Or I've had other situations where I'm up a river and it either drops so hard I can't hardly get back because the rock pass is all sticking out of water and I got to jump rocks on the way out, or it comes up so fast that here comes a bunch of trees down it and you got to start ducking trees. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Now there's a question, and we kind of touched on the shad kill.
Yeah.
A little earlier. How would you fish if you had a giant shad kill off?
I do it one of two ways. I'll either go right where I think that the shad kill is, and I'll start ledgering from shallow to medium to deep, or I'll go where where they're not. It's weird. Like if you get a wind-blown shore that, after a shad kill, especially after the ice comes off, because they'll be stuck to the ice melts and they get all shoved into bays and all that stuff. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. They're just like full. It's like, and you hear it from a lot of people, oh, we had a giant shad kill and the fish are so full you can hardly get a good bite. And that's absolute truth. I mean, that's just biology for you. But sometimes it's best to say, okay, there's been a shad kill. This thing has been blowing, onto the right, the right side of the river for days. And I'm going to have to find a spot that's not affected by the shad kill. Maybe I have to go up because a lot of them have been pushed down. Rivers are different than lakes, but, it is what it is. The other thing that I'll do, that was location. That's location. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, if I can't change location, I'm going to downsize hard. I'm going to not have my burning shark reels. I'm not going to have a Garcia 7000. I am going to pick up a little Garcia 6500, which to me is like a tinker toy. Okay. And I'm going to pick up my ugly stick, medium action, whippy little, great for channel cats, decent for early season flat. It's fine. But they're basically more of a channel cat rod. And so now I'm going to use 20-pound tests, and I'm going to start throwing circle hooks like this size right here. It's so, to me, it's so small, but it's about a 4/0. It's still got a wide gap, and I'm going to use, there we go. If I got a hook in my hand that will fit in the eye of my glasses, that's pretty darn small. But for me, I've caught a lot of big fish on a hook this size, especially when the bite was tough. And, that's what I'm going to do. The other thing, I wish I had a rod in here. I usually have rods in here. but I don't. So I'm just going to describe with my hand here. So when I get the first initial tap, and it may be a blue in the winter, or it may be a channel cat, but it's going to do that first initial tap, tip, tip. I'm going to pick the rod up out of the rod holder. Okay, now my hand's the rod again, and I'm going to feed it down. I'm not going to, necessarily let it like pull clicker, or I'm not going to let it try to manhandle me down, and I'm not going to try to hold my ground like I would with a big blue. I'm going to keep feeding it down until he has enough confidence, and I'll explain why. So when they come up and eat, let's get this. When they come up and it's cold, remember it's cold and it's been a winter kill situation, so the fish are full, but they're just nibbly and they're just eating or whatever. You get that situation on the Illinois River, you get it on the Mississippi all the time in the cold water period. So they'll come up and they'll tap the bait and they'll spit it. They'll tap the bait and spit it. They're just kind of playing with their food or whatever. But and I've seen it with my own eyes in my own tank, and we'll get to that in a minute. But basically they suck it in, and if they're feeling tension, it'll just kind of fall out of their mouth because they're not really all that aggressive. They're not all that grippy. They're not turning and burning. So I'm convincing these fish by letting the end of my rod down like this with every tap, every pull, to where once they can get there, they turn and you can kind of set the hook on them. And I call it the Shaolin hook set. And I taught it to Fishing Magician while he was on lives. And his hookup ratio in the wintertime increased from like almost nothing to like a bunch. And that was pretty cool.
And there was another question out there from Stan 3.
Mm-hmm.
Does wind affect the fishing differently between summer and winter?
I think it does. I usually don't talk about something unless I have enough evidence. The evidence that I do have is on a river that is flowing. Let's just say it's flowing south, and you get horrible wind coming up. I've almost never had a great bite during that. It's got white caps going on. It slows the current. And, even though the temperature didn't drop, the wind switched and slowed my water down. That is usually a rough bite. And it doesn't matter if I've been on the Mississippi, the Illinois, the Wapsie, the Skunk, the Wabash. It doesn't really matter. The Ohio, even your Ohio guys in here are going to be like, oh boy, when that wind comes out. Now they say when it comes out of the east, they bite the least. Well, I fish one of the only pools that goes from west to east, and so yes, that is upriver. So on the Mississippi, when it's going north to south, I fish that one dog leg for flatheads that goes over by the Quad Cities and up. So yeah, slightly lighter rod and sinker slides for winter. Yep, give them the confidence to take it. And Creole, if you can lighten up your sinkers, and I'm a big proponent of big sinkers, if you didn't know. But wintertime, I'll go down to a 3-ounce egg sinker. I'll go down to what barely holds bottom. I'll go down to 1 ounce as well if I have to. Because that tension, it means the difference between putting fish in the boat or not putting fish in the boat. And I'll give you an example. Sean and I, a couple years ago, we went to a power plant lake. We had 3 really lightweight limber rods, and then we had 2 that just weren't quite as limber. They're more like a kind of a pseudo flathead rod, still fairly limber, And we caught almost every fish. And placement on lakes, it's basically equal whether you're going to contact fish or not. Not so much in a river. You can kind of shade it and say, okay, these 3 limber rods caught most of the fish. Well, it's kind of helter-skelter to whether you're going to run into fish here or there. But the stiffer rods were way more likely to have tap, tap, pull. And these are blues, not even channel cats. There's hardly any channel cats even in it. Tap, tap. And then just let it up and never hit it again. While the other ones, the lighter weight ones, we could leave in the rod holder and they'd start going down, and then pretty soon they'd start bowing her down. I had one rod and not to cabbage onto Danny Stone's, but it's pretty much called Black Betty back in the day. And it was about a 9-foot salmon trolling rod, and you know how limber those things are, right? Right, Stan?
I'm sorry. Just say it again. I'm
Stan's
sorry. I
not
was
even
trying to
listening.
get.
Stan's reading. So
Yeah.
I said I had a black.
It was 9 foot.
It's like an IM6 9-foot light action salmon trolling rod.
Yep.
And I threw that in the catfish boat just to see how that would do in periods of colder water. And with the colder water, that rod started to, I mean, I wish I could have found more, because I'd have bought 5 of them, because it was so good at not getting the pressure to those fish that, man, they'd bow that thing down, and it was a blast. So what is it going to take to fish with the Professor YouTube video? How's a man get access to Epic Catfish? Steve, all you got to do is call. That's it. Let's just plan on going in August. We'll have to go. But just remember, it's kind of a rough trip, if you couldn't tell by watching our lives. It's bloody, it's messy, it's dirty. We don't have one of them nice canopies on the boat, and we sit on coolers. It's kind of rough for that.
And there's been a lot of talk out in chat about CatCon. The link for the Catfish Conference. The link for Catfish Conference is out in the description, as always. I know somebody, Jeff from Pennsylvania, mentioned that it's a little too far. Hey, if you can make the trip, you go there. It is just, number one, to get to see all the gear, to get different gear in your hands, between the Muddy River rods and the Freddie rods, the FOA rods, the Uncle Loot rods, whatever, all the different rods out there, to get the different ones in your hands, to talk to all the different people that are there, to get to meet all the awesome people, to hear the seminars. It was great at the Kansas City CatCon, with the seminars being dead center. That was a great setup, because it put them, everybody knew when the seminar was, and they were pretty full. So I thought that was a great idea.
And Stan,
yes. Yeah.
I'm building what you could only describe as a movie set. This CatCon. This thing I've got it in my mind. I haven't had a chance to build it yet, but it is. You will never have seen anything like it. That's for sure.
That is awesome. Well, you did a pretty good job with the last one with the flat heads, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah. But I promised Steve I would have different props this year. So yeah, it's going to be at CatCon this time. It's going to be a whole different thing, and it has something to do with reverse current, because I can explain reverse current a lot, and I don't know if people can get the idea of why or where it exists. I think after this CatCon, people are going to understand at least one scenario, how reverse current happens and how fish position in it, and how important it is for a habitat to have that, because almost every one of them, of any monumental, absolutely holds giant fish. If your river has giant fish and it has some reverse current, not eddies, reverse current. So the top's going this way, the bottom's coming back towards the boat. It holds giant fish consistently. And usually they're not just sitting there waiting out for next Monday. Usually they're pretty agreeable to bite. Have I fished lakes, reservoirs, or I do prefer to stay with big rivers, but yeah, Uncle Jeep, back in the day, I used to fish a lot of them. We have Corps of Engineer lakes. One is Shelbyville Lake, then the other one's Carlisle. It's on the Okaw River Valley and Kaskaskia River system. And I have fished both of them at length. And I'll tell you, the only thing that I found back in those days that would consistently pay in large catfish was going basically to the back of the coves in the flooded timber and working those areas, especially with slip floats, especially with live baits, even, you know, live bluegills. And I was catching gigantic channel cats and all that stuff. Now you can get onto the old creek channel. That's the other thing that's really good. But to go target a flat or try to find it, I felt it was a little bit poke and hope for me back in those days.
Uncle Jeep says, Epic, your presentations the seminars are awesome. Visualization. Wow, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
Helps out a lot.
Yes.
And we had some more awesome people come in. Mike Chavez is out there. Taste.
What up, Mike Chavez?
Brian B. Let's see. Douglas Super Smurf is out there. Maurice Cason. How's it going, Maurice? Eric B. Tony Harrison is out there. Just trying to get caught up. Chat is flying. 54 awesome people. Now, if somebody put a comment or a question in there, I missed a lot of it. But I saw John Parker come in. Thank you very much, John. John is the one that made that design for us.
Yeah,
so
nice.
Definitely like that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, if you had put a question up in, drop it back in, and I will keep up from there. I was trying to read and listen, and it was not working. Dale Hayslip's out there. How you doing?
It's all right, Stan. We'll talk about something that's interesting for the winter period.
There we go.
Period, behaviorally speaking, all catfish, channel cats, flatheads, and blues, their personal space shrinks. So the hotter the water, the bigger their personal space. At times they'll be next to each other, but generally they're kind of not real happy with each other. But as the water gets colder, their metabolism slows, and I have literally been able to video them by use of an underwater camera in natural rivers and lakes. And it goes from like one here and one there and one here and one there to you might have a spot as big as your living room with 5,000 channel cats in it, stacked from the bottom all the way to like 10 feet high. So, yeah, Steve, I thought we already discussed that. Yeah. Yep. I'm going to do a seminar, at least one. Well, shoot, last time I had to do 3. That's all right. That's right up my alley. But anyways, I was so surprised that the difference between wintering channel cats and wintering flatheads was so different. Not only the area that they were in, but how they did it. And so, do you remember ever seeing the footage where they were off of some islands and they actually filmed the hammerhead sharks swirling around in a giant circle? You ever see that?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty amazing, right? Well, I'd already filmed that in channel cat version 10 years earlier. So I took my underwater, which was a Vista cam of the day, and I basically wired it straight up so I could sink it down and I could see through these channel cats how they were doing. And they would keep like a almost a perfect spatial relationship, and they were all circling in a big vortex. Now the bottom had some, but the ones up top were just sort of turning like in a big, slow, beautiful tornado. Some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. Flatheads were laying on top of each other. I bumped into them, tried to get them to eat anything. I think the water was 39 degrees, fairly clear. But I did bump into one in the mouth like that, and he spit algae out. So that tells me that they weren't. And that was back in the day when In Fisherman was trying to fool us all into thinking that they were going to eat jigs. But yet every one that they caught, they had to unhook off camera. Share my new prop action for the 20. Is he talking to me?
I think so.
Okay, so my prop not only do I have to basically build an underwater topography situation with the front, the side, the bump, and then the tail out, and then place catfish in it so that I can describe how that reverse current holds fish and how fish position on it. It's going to be really cool.
Okay. Stan 3 had maybe an in-depth question, but what would you do if you went out on a cold front winter day with clear blue skies from bait to anchor?
Well, I'm going to make sure I got some pretty fresh bait. That's a given. I'm going to look at more. If I'm here in Illinois, I'm going to do something different than I would out in the James, because the James goes through periods of like cold and then it snaps right back. So your fish aren't what I would call truly wintered. Ours, we get that winter period where it settles in somewhere around Christmas, like it is now, and it doesn't let up until mid-February. So for a good solid for a month before that, they've been going to their known wintering habitats, by habit, by instinct, basically. And then they are gathering up because their space, their personal space isn't so bad. So they're kind of packed in there, like behind wing dikes, off drops, on ledges, things like that. But usually it's not the center of the river. Now, when In-Fisherman first started to publish that you need to find these wintering holes and they're the deepest water in your river, well, that kind of applied to very small, like Iowa type rivers, where the average depth is 2-3 feet, and then you might have a 15-foot hole in 25 miles. Now, that applies. But what happens when you have a river such as the Illinois or the Mississippi or the James or the Tennessee, where you have exorbitant amount of deep water for long periods, but you're trying to look for wintering habitat? Okay, so wintering habitat isn't just the deepest water, because there's all kinds of 80 foot, there's all kinds of 90 foot, there's all kinds of 100 foot, doesn't hold a catfish one. There's all kinds of 40 and 50 foot, doesn't hold a catfish one, all winter season. Now, I know this because I went on like some sort of, I don't even know what you want to call that, sabbatical, where, I just went and I said, okay, I looked at the map and I said, I got to see this spot, and I got to see this spot, I got to see this spot, and I got to see this spot. Well, there was lots of them that just didn't have, any number of catfish. But yet, if I got off of that main hole, and let's think about this, hydrodynamically speaking, the biggest, deepest holes in the river are that because they've always got fairly heavy flow, whether it's, and usually it's going to be along the bottom. So it's basically a scoured out thing, because if they didn't, they'd fill in. So it's not really the deepest water. It is the deepest water with a sheltered current flow that is next to, close enough to shallows and bait fish. Because one thing they can't do in the winter, if it warms up, say the water warms up a couple degrees. I've had December 25th that the temperature outside was 62 degrees, sun was shining, water warms up a couple degrees, and we just literally smoked giant channel cats in 5 foot of water. But you couldn't go 100 yards up in 5 foot of water because they weren't moving that far. You had to be adjacent to where they were at. So I found a 15-foot little dip, just a little dip, 15 foot, had 22 foot available to the right of it, had a small island up ahead of it. The current meandered just right, had bait fish up there, and we just, we put it on them for wintertime. I think we caught 60 some fish in a matter of a couple hours. Now remember one thing, cold water is tough because the bite window is short. No matter what, bite window is short. So to reiterate this to your son, the learning curve is a little bit rougher. There's no doubt, because you're going to have to spend time on the water, and time on the water. And, by the time you get to be your dad's age, we're tired of cold already. When you're old, you're cold. And, I've already learned that. So I don't really cold water fish that much anymore. Chat grinds to a halt. Well, okay. So let's get back to that wintering situation and what I'm going to do on the James. I just told you what I'm going to do here where I live, because it's fiercely cold, and like if you get too much, you're either going to ice fish on the river or you're going to chainsaw your way out to it, because the main river might be open, but every boat ramp may have 30 yards of ice that's 10 inches thick, and I literally have chainsawed my way out and ran the motor, turned the boat around and pushed giant pieces of ice out into the main river just to get out there. Now I'm over that, but anyways, if I was on the James, which doesn't normally ice over, you might have a little ice in the backwater, you might have a little ice at the boat ramp, this much, little skim of ice. I've been out
We
there
just
in the
go
winter.
through that.
I've been out there in the winter many times. So what I'm going to be looking for on the James is I'm going to be looking for kind of a major, I wouldn't say a major tributary, but you've got some of those major like little flowage inlets that are coming in. I call them kind of creeks. They're fairly deep. I remember a couple in specific that are kind of flowing into the James. And then there's what I call a secondary channel. So you got your whole river, wide as the screen, right? You got your main channel that's basically deep, like down by Hopewell. So, okay, let's do it. So you got the whole river like this, and you may have 3/4 of the river that is your main deep flow. But right over here, there's a hump that comes up, and then it slopes back down. You still got decent water, deep water, but the current just doesn't hit it as much. I love those secondaries, especially because I can throw up on that hump, because you might be going maybe on the riverside, it's 45, 50, and then it humps up to about 20, 25, and then slopes back down to about 35, 40 like this. So I like to sit on those and throw left like I usually do, hit that top of that and have it sweep and catch the other side of it, because it's really not that snaggy on the James. I mean, there's some snags, but there's a lot of clay down there. So and then I can throw one out a little bit further and hopefully hit the top of that where that ridge is coming up like this, and then get on and then have it fall down the slope onto this little bit slower, the secondary channel, if you will. So then I'm going to target the bottom of that, and then I'm going to target the bottom of that, and then I'm going to start throwing towards the bank as hard as I can, because I'm just going to range out like this. I mean, just poof, if you could just cast them all at once, range out and say, okay, 12 foot of water, 15 to 12 foot of water is what I need to focus on, because they're coming off here, but I'm getting nothing in the thing. So my next anchor or whatever, maybe I'm going to say, Sean, let out 100 feet, because it kind of slopes up here. And I'm going to pay attention to my fish finder, because one thing about blues is that in the cold water, they are less mobile, even though they're pretty mobile. They're really mobile compared to channel cats and flatheads. Flatheads don't hardly move a wiggle an inch. Channel cats will get up and move, but they usually like to stay tight. But blues blues are the most adapted to cold water. That's it. I'm still gonna downsize. I probably wouldn't downsize. This is for like channel cats right here. This one. I wouldn't use 13s and 14-aught or 12-aught probably. I'd use a nice 7-aught wide gap, thin wire hook. On the James, I'd probably use a 6-ounce sinker. Because if I'm throwing 10s and 8s on the James, only in high tide is it going to pull off of that. So I'm going to use something more like a 5 or a 6, so I can let it sit a while. Then I can pull it and then move it, pull it and move it. So it's like bumping, only it's the slowest version that there is. Because big catfish are careful creatures. I keep saying that. And one of these days, I'm going to get somebody that agrees with me there.
Oh, I definitely agree with you. Like we were talking about before, there is, when you're talking different, not only the different flathead, channel, and blues, but different sizes of those, they are all going to act a little differently. I know you were talking.
Oh, they do.
And you see with bumping and drifting and that stuff, where you'll catch 50s and 60s, which for most people is a giant fish.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And they'll catch an occasional 70 or 80. But when somebody goes out and they bump up 3 70 and 80-pound class fish in one spot, and then they do it again next week, and then they do it again next week, I'll start thinking about bumping.
We had Nina's kayak crew join us. She is now a Two Stands Fishing family member there. Thank you, Nina. I had another question that, and I had another question. Well, thank you, Nina. Thank you. Well, we'll do Freddie's question here. So does Epic prefer long rods or short rods when fishing from a boat? He's just asking for a friend.
Well, I actually enjoy all of the above. I like to take short rods, which are 7 foot or thereabout, 7.2, 7. I call a short rod a 7.6. That's your normal average. But I do have like a tow truck rod that's like 7.2, something like that, and I like to put those in the upper portion as down rods, because I don't really need to range out too much. All I need to do is get them straight down. So my average rod length is 7'10", but then I've got some 11 footers that I actually use from the boat. Now, do I like to use those 11-foot lighter weight stuff on super mega giants in fast current? They're painful to watch somebody reel those in. It's painful. It takes forever. And then you don't get really a bunch of leverage on the fish. So I really try not to use big. If I have to range out, or especially if I have to throw upstream into a dam, I love long rods. Yeah.
Steve has got a good question, and I have had that happen with some of the smaller fish, but do you have any issues knocking the eyes out of your cats with your hooks? He says he seemed to be blinding a lot of fish, so he's looking for something different.
I did with the Team Catfish hooks, which were the Daiichi Circle Chunk lights, but I only did that with small fish, like 50 and under. Usually the 70s, 80s, 90s, and whatever, it's usually too far away from their eye, even like a 12-aught hook or even whatever. And, you know, it's hard to describe, but since I'm using such big baits, they don't seem to be able to get that in so far that it gets up into the eye socket. Does that make sense? But yeah, I mean, that is an issue, and I worried about it too, because that's one of the reasons why I use a snap swivel on my rod. Then I don't have to cut it. I can actually pull it out in reverse. So if it does come up in the eye socket, I can take it out and just unhook that and just go boom like this. Just pull it out, and it seems to save the eye, Steve. Matter of fact, we'll talk about that at CatCon a little bit, because I plan on going around and seeing some different hooks. I've purchased a whole bunch last CatCon, and we're going to see how those go. And I'm kind of trying things that are kind of new too, because what I really want, and this is going to sound dumb, but I want a 16-aught hook that has the same wire size as like a 7-aught hook. I think they'll be plenty strong, but I need a hook that'll get underneath the bottom jaw. And as we all know, the bottom jaw on a giant fish is that big around. You can't close your hand around it. It's as big as a grown man's wrist. So I need, when they're backing up, I miss fish. I miss big fish when they're backing up. And I can tell they're big fish because you get the first hit, boom, boom, and then it's 12 inches down bowl like this, and it's just all nice, slow, and deliberate. But yet, I don't get a hookup. And when they turn and burn, you know it, because when it goes down, it does one of these. When the hook penetrates and it goes, this one just kind of goes and goes and goes and goes, and it just fobbles out of the mouth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and it haunts me. So I need a 16. But I only need a 16 on my giant baits. and I only need giant baits, like super giant baits, is when I got too many 30s and 40s running around that I can't afford to spend time on. Okay, so that makes
Everybody's laughing out there.
I know, but if I'm catching a bunch of 30s and 40s, because 30s and 40s are very aggressive fish, they're young, they're very aggressive fish, and they're running amok and running around, and they're boom, and they're hitting these big baits like that. Yeah, but if I'm using baits like this, which a big fish would eat too, but I'm spending my time and creating a big ruckus with these 30s and 40s, and I probably am missing those 80s and possibly 100-pound fish because I just know, because I go into an area where there's 5 fish and they're not moving. They haven't been moving all day. Fishing with Epic. Yeah, that's right. Yep. So anyway, all day long, I have maybe noticed that I've got, say, just small groups of fish, right? They're not like in epic spots. They haven't been traveling enough to kind of build up into a corralling zone, like behind a wing dike or maybe a dip or a big hole. So I will throw the baits out, and if they're, just say I'm just using just say it's a picky bite, okay? And the picky bite says, they're not getting on my nerves, Steve. I'm just trying to not screw up and miss an 80 or a 90 or a 100. They're not getting on my nerves. It's okay. So there's 4 fish in a spot, all within casting distance of my anchor, right? 2 of the fish are 40, 30, 40, and 2 of them are super giants. I never catch the super giants first. Not one time. If there's other fish in those zones, I never catch the super giant first. Unless he's off to a side and I can throw off to the side and put it in line and put him in the face. But he still takes 5, 6, 7 minutes to bite, even if I'm very confident that I've got it within 2 foot of him. And he knows that bait's there in 2 foot. I mean, in 25 foot of water, if you happen to mark one sitting on a ledge in 2 foot, if you've been doing it long enough to know, I know, because I can triangulate those fish, blah, blah, blah. I see them on my fish finder. I know the speed and the depth and whatever's going on. I know exactly where to cast it, blah, blah, blah. And the only way to know that is if you can consistently do that on fish that bite like quick, like a minute or two, it's in their face. But I have never had a giant that I was very confident, very, very confident that I put that within like maybe an area like that in front of them, not behind them, not to the side of them, not too far in front, but like that. And he still take 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes to choose to bite that. And here's the other thing. Those small fish always come to and ask yourself this, guys. Whenever you've got onto an epic anchor and you've had 30s and 40s and 50s, if you're going to catch a mega monster, it's usually somewhere after that, somewhere after all the whatever, but sometimes it never happens because things get stirred up. He goes to investigate, and all of a sudden, boom, here comes the 30 or 40. Because big blues are not like flatheads. Flatheads are like, I'm going to dispatch you before you even have a chance to get my food. Well, big blues kind of compete. Little and big blues do. They'll sit there, they'll whatever. So that's why I say big blues are careful creatures. They're kind of calculating. They don't have to get up and eat all the time, because when they do eat, when they choose to, when they can eat monster stuff. So, if I could eat a whole pizza in one bite whenever I wanted to, I wouldn't have to eat all the time. I wouldn't go to the refrigerator. I'd be like, I'll just wait for a pizza.
And Tim, you've heard me say this before, just to get to that, talking about the 30s and 40s. It's not the size of the fish. It's the size of the excitement that it brings.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Tim has had so much excitement with those 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yes, I have.
Now it's that 90, 100 that it gets his excitement. If it's the 30s or 40s that you get so excited over, that's what it is that you're going after. If it's a 10-pounder and that's what gets you excited. So it's That's what drives everybody, is that excitement, it's that happiness, it's that thrill. And if it's 10 pounders, it's 10 pounders. Be proud of that, be happy, stay excited, because I tell you what, you get excited, you catch those 10 pounders, you're going to start catching 20s. And then that 10 pounders,
Stan at one time,
now it's going to be the 20.
Monster for me. It was a monster. I would dance a jig. I would take pictures, and granted, there was no phones back in those days. I'd have to like take a picture with a regular camera, go get it developed, and of course, my head would be cut off or the fish would be cut off and all that, So I was like one of the first ones to get a digital camera, because you could actually look at it and go, "Oh, it's a pretty decent picture. We can release the fish now." Yeah. Where'd you go, Stan?
Sorry, I had a knock on the door. My granddaughter just wanted to say hi and
Hi. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah. Have you been listening to this ultra exciting stuff? This stuff is better than television, I'm telling you.
Right? Better than television?
Because you're in it.
Oh, I love you. So Stan 3 had a question. So if we are catching 60s in a spot consistently, do you think that 100 plus is there too, and our presentation just isn't right?
Could be because and let me explain a major scenario with 100 pounders. 100 pounders, they don't seem to purposefully hang out with other fish, but what they do is they like certain. We'll get to that, G-Style. I got a bucket list and a half. So they like a certain. Let's just say this: I don't catch or mark 100-pound fish in like your average spot. Usually, they're what I would call an epic spot. One of the reasons why I called my channel that is because I've kind of always been calling them that, and it's more like a culmination of a long period of like kind of nondescript water that kind of ends upstream into something kind of fantastic. Drop, a ridge, a line, a big current swath coming around, maybe a reverse current coming up, maybe there's a pile of trees. And it wouldn't matter if you're talking about channel cats, flatheads, or blues, but especially blues. I don't seem to have over the years just marked an occasional gigantic blue in like a spot I would not expect him in. What's up, Steve Adams? Tiny Smith. It was. So anyway, Steve, absolutely. So when we're talking about megafish, you might have two megafish together. You might have like something that's like kind of close, like a 70 and 280s. We've seen that on my live. Okay. They're all in the same area. I marked them earlier. I went up to the spot that would actually corral them because I threw it in their faces earlier and they wouldn't bite. But yet I kind of set up an ambush spot, put out enough baits to where if they came up, if they got active, once night hit, they come up and they mill around and finally catch that thing. Oh yeah, let's talk about pH. Don't let me forget that. I did a whole bunch of studies on pH in college and a little bit after that. And anybody who has a fish tank understands a little bit about pH, but none of us give pH its worth on the water, and kind of hope we never do. But anyways, so you let me try to get back to that. Maybe you got a couple of big blues hanging out together, maybe 2, 3, 4, but almost never do I start to catch. I don't catch like a giant and then a smaller one and then a giant and then a smaller one, then 2 or 3 smaller ones, and then whatever. Now maybe that's because of the way I do it, not really where I'm doing it or whatever. And yes, the bite will stop at 50, 60, hit 10 minutes later. But then, and let me explain this. Usually if I'm going to catch 80s, I don't catch a bunch of 20s unless I'm throwing unless I'm really ranging out. I might catch a 20, like in closer to the bank where the current's a little bit less. Normally, if I'm going to catch 40s, 50s, and 60s, that's usually what I'm going to catch. If I'm going to catch 70s and 80s, that's usually what I catch. I may, after the flurry's over or whatever. But if I'm kind of to pinpoint targeting fish, it's usually what I've seen, what I've marked, what I came for, and what I'm trying to do. Now, sometimes matter of fact, there was a live show last season that we marked big fish running amok. They were hovering off the bottom, running underneath the boat. I'm like, Sean, there's a freaking school bus running. There goes a hippo. There goes a whatever. And we couldn't get them to bite. We could not get those giant fish to bite until it got later in the night, and we had to go to a pinnacle spot. We had to go to where, since they were running kind of crazy, okay, they weren't finding our baits. I had to shorten up the distance, and I had to get a blocker, something that would block them from 2-3 foot up. I had to go to a basic old wing dike that is like really short, so that it would corral them long enough for them to find our baits. And yeah, then we were catching 50s, 60s, and 70s. But but the one thing about the 100, are you doing it right? Usually I find that if you're targeting super big fish, at least the way I think about it, I have to keep the small fish from spending my time. Because if we're getting lambasted by 20s and 30s, that 100 could have been the one to bite that right before a 30 got to it, if you get what I mean. Because I've got it's usually a short bite window. It's an hour or two when those big fish are going to get active. So the thing about it is, if I have spent my time with all my rods in the boat, when that big fish has moved from point A to point B to where my rods, my baits were, and it's not there, he's already up underneath the boat and gone. So I'm trying, which I think it works pretty good, because I used to use smaller baits, and I do much better with numbers of big fish consistently, like really big fish, really consistently.
And Tim, you've mentioned under the boat, coming up under the boat. One of the big things that I've done that I know that and fishing with Dan and Stan 3,
yep,
and I've seen a lot of people doing it now, is having that down rod. You even mentioned it earlier.
Yep.
One sure way to guarantee that you've got your bait in front of fish is to have one directly under the boat.
That's right.
Because you may cast over them. So
yep.
We are always using it. Now, right now, we've been using the Freddie's rods, the FOA rods, as our down rods, because they can handle a big weight to keep it suspended straight down. But that was a point that I noticed you kept bringing up, was those fish coming up under the boat.
And they will, because they'll come up 3 feet high. And in my current, I could use the biggest demon dragon in the world. It's still going to lay on the bottom. I don't care. It just doesn't matter. I like demon dragons in slow water. I really do. But my fast water, it'll just lay it to the bottom. It doesn't hold anything up because there's current on the bottom. There's a bunch of current on the bottom. It'll just. How's it going, Mr. Bagri?
But yeah, so I think that's an opportunity that a lot of people have, is and it doesn't take any extra especially if you're anchored, to throw that extra rod out.
No.
In front of the boat.
Sinker on the bottom. I'll put down rods as high. If I see fish running 4 feet off the bottom and they're mega monsters showing up on my screen like this, and they're like that fat with red and all that in the middle, and I've got my sensitivity turned down to 2. That's the other thing I plan on talking about. Is I'm not a compared to a tournament guy, I'm kind of not very good at running a fish finder, but for what I do, I think I might be one of the only ones out there that runs a fish finder with the sensitivity set at like 1. Like 1.
Wow.
Why would I run it at 1?
Well, for the same reason that you use the donkey baits and everything else, it'll eliminate those other. All that's going to show up is those bigger fish that you are targeting that get you excited.
Yes.
It's a whole. It all goes together.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've learned from you, Epic, is it's all in the. It just one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. It's awesome.
So I will look at an area. Maybe my sensitivity is set at 5. Okay, because I want to see a little bit of biomass and all that stuff. Teeter shot, yeah. I want to see a little bit of biomass. Okay, I want to see something going on because I mean, and I want to know where the 20s and 30s are hanging out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I mark 20s and 30s, I want to be able to pick out the super giants. I don't want 2 25s sitting next to each other showing me that they're a 4-foot fish. You know what I'm saying? Because it will. I mean, Sonar is not that great. I mean, it's great, but it's not that yet. So if I got 2 fish that are 25s, that might cost me 40 minutes of like pining over this fish that I think might be a 5-footer. You know, what are my favorite rod holders? That is monster rod holders.
I was going to say I can handle this one for you. Monster rod holders. What else is there?
Monster rod holders, because I did lose, and that one haunts me. It does. It haunts me still. If you only mark one good fish, do you fish that spot or look for a spot with more marks? Steve Ransom. If I believe that fish, and I'm
fishing the James, by the way. He fishes the James.
Okay.
Smith Lake, Virginia.
If I think that fish is 60 inches plus, 60, 65, even 55. If I think it's 55, I'll give that fish a shot if it's a single fish. There's no doubt. But if it's only 4 foot, I will not, because I know I can go somewhere else usually and mark more fish that are 4 foot. I can mark multiple 4 foots, most likely, and a bunch of 3 foots and a bunch of 2 and a scat of 2 foots. Okay. But it's that 5-foot fish that gets me excited. Yeah,
I agree.
G style, then I'd have to use a weight so big it would have to be like a soup can to hold the Gatorade bottle down.
You remember the old coffee can anchors?
Yeah.
That would be your that'd be your weight.
Yeah. Well, that's what my weights look like. They have to have a shoulder on them so that they don't get, like swept off the side. And every once in a while, I'll take those donkey baits, the weights, the big ones, like the super ones, and throw them out to the side. Those are hard to get back. It's only if I think I absolutely have to do it will I risk one of those 2-pound weights, doing that. Spooks, Triple City Angler for all you spooks and hooks and reels. Yeah, I used one. Up in the Keokuk area in Dead Man's Hole during a live, and it performed really well because it's a 40-foot swirling hole. There's not a whole lot of straight line current, so I do believe that Demon Dragon did help hold it off the bottom in that condition. Yeah. And
that's code 2stands10 for 10% off at triplecityanglish.com.
There you go. Okay, so let's get to the pH question. This is not good news either, because pH is it's another thing. And anybody who remembers just their regular chemistry class, we all know that pH has got a scale, 0 to 14. 7 is normal, right? 7. Mm-hmm. So it's neither alkali or acidic. Mm-hmm. Well, as soon as you get rain, or as soon as you have a drought, your pH will start getting off. You get too much silt in, you get too much organic matter, you get too many phosphates, you get too much lime, you get too much whatever. It will throw it in. Now, the pH, you've got a range between 7, all from like about 5.2 all the way up to almost 9. That's fairly decent for fish, but as soon as it redlines one way or the other, they have a hard time breathing, believe that or not. I know why, and it would take me forever to explain it, and everybody get bored. but it has to do with it has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with electrolytes. It has to do with osmosis. Fish don't drink, by the way. They get it through their skin, so they're drinking heavily acidic or heavily alkali. Oh, Steve Adams. I believe that is the most important thing that I do, bar none. Because if you cannot get your boat in the right spot, it's a circus. Okay, and I've been the circus master many times, where I just couldn't get it in the right spot for some reason. I'm like, what is your problem? I'm like cussing myself in my mind. I'm like, what is your problem? The fish are there. I anchor, the boat goes back, it switches a little bit to the left. I'm like, they're over there. What am I doing? Oh, I looked at this and I didn't look at that. And I was staring at my fish finder and I swerved off course and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, and luckily, Sean is a very good sport. So Sean's like, I'll pull that anchor out of 45 foot of water again. Let's get that right anchor. I'm like, okay, I'll pull it. He's like, no. You just get us back on the fish. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I can't tell you how many times Stan 3 and we've moved the boat 15 feet one way or the other, and bam, I mean, just a whole different, your rod set better, and all of a sudden we're catching fish. It's doesn't have to be a big move or off that much.
So Captain
Loudly
Morgan
tennis. Oh, go ahead.
He has an interesting question. I would say, depending on your fish as you see them on your fish finder, because normally when I make the distinction whether I'm going to suspend a bait or whether I'm going to fish on bottom, I'm going to look for fish. Are they hovering or are they down low? Are they 4 inches from the bottom? Are they 6 inches from the bottom and just straight lined? I don't get too excited about a straight line fish. It's just hanging out like that, tails going. Blah, blah. I like to see one, and I'm not a fan of looking at arches on my hummingbird. Okay, I try not to see arches. I want straight fish. I want to know if they're down, face down, tail up. I want to know if they're just lackadaisical, like they're hanging out, and I've said it many times, like they're hanging out in Bass Pro Shops, just biding their time. I just want to say I most of the time will bottom fish. Most of the time. And I'm more apt to suspend fish in slower water if I think the big fish have moved up there. If I think that if I'm seeing an absence of them in the current, which isn't very often, every once in a while, for some reason they're hanging around in 20 foot of water just off bottom, and maybe I'll suspend some. I love to use floats, but I don't have opportunity to use floats that much because the current's so swift. I just don't. I mean, shoot, I could get a float that'll hold my bait up, but that thing, it'll just start blowing the bait up. So I just don't. Now, when I fish ponds and lakes, you betcha, I would suspend under floats all the time. I'd use the wind. I'd cast past, use the wind to bring it into the drop off to where it would just, and a lot of times I'd use a paternoster, which means weight on the bottom, hook up, so that when it contacted that steep ledge that I couldn't, since I didn't have a fish finder, I was on the shore, I couldn't tell you exactly where it was, but I could find it because I knew it was about a 15-foot ledge. So I'd set a slip float at 15 with the sinker on the bottom, the bait about 2 foot up like this to keep it out of the vegetation, let it sweep right into the bank, and that weight just basically slides along and hits the ledge like that, and you're placed perfectly. I did that with giant smallmouths and my kids one time. Giant smallmouths up in Minnesota.
Do you have any tricks to get better at pinpointing your anchors?
Yes. Grit your teeth and bear down on it, because do not ever go, oh, that's close enough. Because once you grit your teeth and bear down on it, you go, okay, And the best thing is watch your prop wash. Watch. Because if you start looking and you start watching your fish finder too hard without glancing back at your prop wash, you start to lose track because you start moving left or right. And we all know 3 feet to the right and you're off the fish. 3 feet to the left and you're off the fish. Because if you put the anchor down by the time that is, you could be as much as like way off the fish. Especially if they're, one side of that to the other. Just say you're just kind of skirting the fringe. Practice, and do not. I don't know. I don't know what kind of anchor Stan 3 throws with his. He probably doesn't with his kayak.
Oh, we use never lost anchors.
Okay, so I just went to a really heavy anchor because I got tired of pinpointing them and then sliding because we have a lot of sand in the main channel. There's a whole bunch of sand. So I run that 40-pound Hurricane anchor, which is a beast. You could probably grapple a T-Rex with it and pull him down if you wanted to. But I got 200 foot of 5/8 climbing rope at 10,000 breaking strength or so. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I've done I've done it all the other way and broke anchor lines and, got my hands all rawed up over a 4-day trip. I just said, you know what? I'm just spending the money for it. I just did. I like throwing the lighter weight anchors when I'm not in Blue Cat territory. I mean, I'll throw a little never lost, a little 12-pounder because that's all I need. A lot of times I'll go up to a piece of wood and I've got these little fish, these little brush grabber thing. It's like a pair of pliers. I just go up there and I grab a thing. And it's got a little short rope. That's awesome.
Now Daniel is coming out with he's got prototypes and stuff. He is coming out with a new design of anchor to hold better in the softer bottoms. So
nice.
It's going to be a little bit different pedal on the bottom. So that's going to be
like
pretty
a box
cool.
Anchor.
Yeah, Stan 3 he says, I'm pretty confident in my anchoring. Just asking for a friend. Okay. But Jeremy was saying, if you get a chance, buy a Solix Hummingbird or the Apex side imaging feature and images are unreal. It's eye-opening unit.
Interesting. Well, Jeremy, I just bought the Helix 9 not too long ago, and I spent quite a bit of money for it, so it'll be a while.
Let's see.
All right, Stan, you're going to have to talk to the people. I got to go visit something.
All right.
The restroom.
Okie doke. Wow, what a night so far, huh? If there's anybody has any other questions here, Kitty, good to see you. I know all kinds of information. I'm still tongue-tied, just trying to remember everything. Thank you, Jody. Appreciate that. Please give a thumbs up for the great show tonight. I know one of the rigs that Epic uses, and I try to use it for suspending straight down under the boat, is sinkers on the bottom, and then the hook is just snelled directly to the leader. So if you're seeing that they're suspended a couple of feet up, you can actually get that bait exactly 2.5, 2 feet, whatever. You just have that hook that farther up above the sinker. And it does work really well. That's right, Roger. It's always a great time when Epic is, and there's always something to talk about. Well, thank you. Hey, that's a good question, Steve. I know myself, we don't really sharpen them. The new hooks now have they come, most of them are so sharp. I know years ago was a little different where you would had the little whetstone, but now they are, some of them come so sharp, you got to be careful holding the package. Fishes will say, a nice topic so far. Ready to hunt some giants now. Yes, and this time of year, some great giants. Great time of year to catch the giants. There's a good question, Jeremy. What causes the fish to suspend higher in the water column and when? Going to be applying a couple new things after this, without a doubt. I know sometimes with the circle hooks, that if you sharpen it too much, obviously when you sharpen it, you're bringing that point in a little bit. Even though it's going to be sharper, it changes the angle at which it's. So that point normally from the barb to the tip, like that, and if you sharpen it, it'll get shorter. So I don't know. I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but we'll ask Epic about that when he gets back. Yeah, that's right, Fishizzle. Save some for the rest of Tennessee. Good sharpener. I know I had one of the, had a little wooden handle on it and a triangle whetstone. We had a couple good questions while you were gone.
Oh, yeah?
One was about sharpening hooks.
Ah, yes. I wish I had a nickel for every hook I sharpened back in the day because, they didn't really have hooks that you could afford, well, or that I could afford, that were like they are now. Now they're like chemically sharpened by
Right.
lasers and hardened. So, back in the day, like an old LO42 that you'd find, at your local bait shop and LO42s and O'Shaughnessy's. I used to use those stupid, big, giant shark hook looking things because that's all you could get. You had to sharpen the heck out of those things because, they wouldn't even cut a piece of paper when you got them out of the package. But since they came out with these newer chemically sharpened hooks, they're pretty good. Now, if I'm in rocky terrain, I won't spend the time while I'm fishing to sharpen them. Luckily, I have enough hooks. I can just throw it into my little pool noodle thing, and I'll sharpen them when I'm at home. I'll just put on a new one because when you're out there, time is of the essence. So, but sharpening hooks, definitely. Definitely, because I've had some hooks that just the tip in rocky stuff will just fold right over like that, and you're like, oh.
And with circle hooks, that's critical. Is that tip, because even if you're using scaly fish, especially like shad for bait and carp and things where it's got a pretty tough scale, having that scale stuck on there will prevent.
It will too. Okay, Jeremy, that is a very good question, and I have found there's probably more answers to this, but the two that I know of that sticks close to home is two things. And when you're in a system that has pelagic bait fish, meaning they're andrometous, they move, they cycle, they come in, your blueback herrings, your all like that stuff you get on the James River. The Potomac has got they've got another herring species that comes in. They're little tiny things, and they'll be in these big, even shad, they'll be in these big masses, and they're higher in the water column. So you get fish suspending underneath those. So keying on bait fish is one. The other one, when they start to suspend, there's some sort, and that happens usually in a harsh river situation. Like, well, I notice it more in my harsh river situation. When they're suspended, they're not usually interested in eating unless they're moving. If they're stationary, suspended, just sort of, it's almost like they're in limbo. But if they're up and moving, they can be suspended 2-3 foot, and they're more interested in moving than they are feeding. That's the one thing. So when I see a bunch of big fish, and in a bunch for me is 2 or 3 in an area, maybe it's the size of a football field. I got 2 or 3 donkeys running around in that area, and so I mark them. I think, okay, are they resting or are they feeding? So I'll go up and then I'll go back, and oftentimes they will not be right where I marked them before. So then I got kind of a clue that they're moving. And so if they're moving, and I've seen them below dams do it, I've seen them below wing dikes do it, I've seen them on the main channel do it, and it's kind of frustrating. Oh, that's interesting. Muskrat. So normally what I do is I can't target them kind of where they're at. If they're sitting there, I can try to target them, but most of the time they're just not interested in biting. But once again, I'll go to an apex situation that sort of corrals them. So, and I got to find something that's higher than what they are. Okay, so if they're 3 foot off the bottom, I got to find something at least 4 foot off the bottom, at least some sort of incline, some sort of a massive wood pile, some sort of rock drop, some sort of hole like the head of it, and I got to set up there because I got to find something that stops them so that they kind of got ADD at that point. Okay, they're kind of running amok. They're all whatever. They're moving upstream. They're active, but they're not feeding right there. So I got to find someplace where they're going to feed at, set up, and ambush them. And I'd say 75% of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So what was that last question before or comment?
It was about rolling blues, rolling.
Oh yeah, rolling blues. I don't get that much where I fish, but I have seen it. I've seen it on Lake of the Ozarks. I've seen it on Santee Cooper. I've seen it on the James, but usually it's not like there's a whole bunch of them rolling around. I have seen it on the Mississippi a couple times, and that's when the tiny skipjack are running around. They're like this, and they're hanging out behind the barges, and I'll see blues targeting them. But usually they're not giants. Usually they're like 20s or 30s. And I've tried to basically flatline these things by taking some of those, hooking them with a lighter line and no sinker, and laying them out there. And I just haven't been successful doing it. Would I use a float? Yeah, if that's all. If I was completely frustrated and that's all the shot I had, yeah, I would. I've seen it at Dead Man's Hole a few times, but they were actively feeding, and I threw a float out there suspended about 6 inches underneath the water, and all I got was gar bites. So I really don't. For me, I don't give that much credibility.
Do flatheads living near hot water discharge stay active all year?
No. They don't stay that active in a fish tank in 79-degree artificial water. Will they bite? Yeah. As far as active, I would say no, because of the experience I have. Before I was a giant river fisherman, I was a power plant lake guy. I fished a lot of reservoirs, a lot of impoundments, and I would walk miles just to get to the warm water discharge, just so I could have a shot at flatheads. Well, most of the flatheads that was ever caught in those situations in the true winter, even though the water was warm, steam was coming off of it, blah, 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 they're mostly snagged. They're wintering in there. They're piled up. For some reason, even though the water temperature isn't below 39 degrees, they still eat, where under 39 degrees, they just simply don't. But that winter, that winter thing that we have around where I fish is strong. It's this weird force that gets them almost no matter what, But it was 50-degree water when we were dragging baits on the Tennessee River, and we caught a stinking flathead. I was like, huh, interesting. I just don't have enough experience with cold water trying to target flatheads, except for the warm water discharges like way back in the day. And it could be because I just wasn't smart enough. I mean, that could be the thing. If I was to tackle it now, I would go about it and probably understand it better than I did 30 years ago. A lot of people fish in the same water. Do you think they need to find new spots? Allow your good spots to rest a week or two? Yeah, let me tell you a story about that. I had a good milk run, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago on gigantic flatheads. So, I'd catch 50 flatheads in a season, which the season's only for me that I spent targeting flatheads was late May, maybe the last week of May till the first week of July. Granted, I fished it almost every day, probably 28 days, but if I was going to catch 50 fish over 50 pounds, I couldn't keep hitting the same spots, so I developed a milk run of probably 25 or 30 spots that held big fish pretty consistently. And so, yeah, I'd let them sit for at least 3 days because I could just, I'd go and whoop up on big flatheads in one spot during the pre-spawn, which you're going to catch numbers during the pre-spawn here. It's not super hot water yet. They're still fairly agreeable to each other, and they're all wanting the same type of habitat. So I can go into an area that's, maybe the size of somebody's living room and at some point catch two or three in the, 25 and 30 pound range, maybe one over 50, maybe a 60, and if I'm lucky, catch a 70 or an 80. But if I kept doing that, the fishing success in those particular spots, if I only had 7 or 8 and I was fishing them almost every day, it would just fall to almost nothing. I had to go out there and learn new spots so that I wasn't like burning my normal spots up. And yes, absolutely, you got to find new spots. If you're going to fish a lot, you can't keep hammering the same and expect the same kind of success. That's just it. I fished the top side of a channel swing versus the bottom side. Yes, Uncle Lou, there is. The top side and the bottom side, I usually try to fish them at the same time and then decide from there. I let the fish tell me because there's really no time of year because it's such close proximity that the bottom of a channel ledge, whoop, like this, and then maybe it goes up or maybe it just dribbles out. Any given day, and that's why I say catfish behavior changes hour to hour and day to day. Because yesterday I could have been catching them at the bottom of the ledges, and then today they're mid-range or they're way up on top. So I try to set up experimental anchors. The first, 3, 4, 5 anchors, I really do, and I try to say, okay, I think they're going to be here, so I'm going to kind of focus on that, but I'm also going to put baits up and listen to what they're telling me. And then if they're telling me I better be in 14 foot of water on the side of the, up the lip on a ledge, you can bet I'm going to keep trying to reproduce that. Even though I'm still going to throw some deep because they could change in that hour and say, okay, I'm focusing on this. Matter of fact, if you've got a swath of baits out and you start noticing that there's a travel zone, just say it's to the right of the motor or to the left of the motor. And this is where you're catching the fish. This is where you're catching the fish. You're catching them in like a 6 foot wide swath and everything else that's cast out isn't getting anything. Well, then you know what to do. Then you can pull in some of that. You can say, okay, I'm going to put this short, but I'm going to put it about 3 feet across the motor a little bit. And I'm going to put one right over the motor. Then I'm going to go long, and then I'm going to go long. So I'm kind of putting more baits in that travel zone instead of just hoping that fish are going to move left or move right, because sometimes they're very focused. They're just moving and feeding. They're on their way going somewhere, and you got to find that right little zone. Okay, not just a ledge, a channel swing from one side of the river to the other. So what they're kind of talking about is you might have a wider stretch and then the channel will swing this way and then it'll swing that way, not necessarily with the thing in the river. Is that what you're talking about, Muskrat? I'll wait for him to answer before I do that.
All right.
For the mid-range on a ledge, I think dragging bait straight up the ledge is a good option to use, and do it slow to stay out of snags. Yeah, I agree with that, Jeremy. But our ledges, if you were to drag on the Mississippi, you're going to be doing nothing but tying. I've done it. You're going to be tying stuff more than you're going to be fishing. Epic, who taught you the majority of techniques besides trial and error? Really, Jeff, it was okay. So I'll go back to muskrats in just a second. Really, there wasn't a lot of people to learn from back then, Jeff. I had to really, I mean, that's why I always say I failed miserably in the first 10 years. And I mean, I went after it hard. I mean, I went after it hard. And books and magazines and people that ran bait shops gave me a whole bunch of preconceived notions that just absolutely weren't true at all. So I kind of got sent down a wrong road, and I had to really look at this thing with a. I had to get rid of the humanistic fables to it. I had to look at it at a biological level. I really did. I had to understand that fish are simple creatures. They have instincts. Us people are born a blank slate. We know almost nothing. We know like 3 things. We know to cry, we poop, and we know how to eat. That, I mean, that's it. But
we're hungry.
But that's because we're higher beings. Well, fish are cerebral cortex oriented. They have a little tiny brain, and then they have the cerebellum, and they have a very advanced nervous system. Well, their nervous system lets them feel things that we can't. That, you know, our nervous system, we're in air. Our nervous system is terrible, actually. You know, yeah, we have a sense of touch, but the barometer, when it drops or rises, doesn't really have a whole lot of effect on us. I mean, yeah, some of us can feel it in our bones and stuff, but it's a whole nother level when it comes to fish. It's a whole nother, you know, dropping water and pressure is so different. And think about this. Air is at the surface is pretty much a constant pressure. Well, every 10 foot you go down or up is like in our entire atmosphere. It's actually more than that. I just describe it because it's easy. It's like several atmosphere more. So if they go from a shallow ledge and then plunge down in 30, 40, or 50 feet, I mean, that's like, I mean, that would drive us completely bonkers. But they're so adapted to it because it's built into their survival. Because they, you know, all catfish. Matter of fact, there was no catfish in lakes until we got here. There was none, unless it was a flowage that was connected. It was a lake-like river or anything like that. And they were all free-flowing rivers, so they had to, you know, basically adapt and survive to be able to be successful in a natural free-flowing river, which is constantly, which back in the day, before dams, was even more volatile than what we have now. Way more volatile. I mean, we have leveled things out. We made rivers like the Tennessee that used to be an average of 8, 9, 12 foot deep. Now they're a big lake situation, basically a riverine lake. The James has always been there, but catfish weren't there. The Potomac's always been there, but catfish weren't there. It was basically the Mississippi River drainage, and let me tell you something. Back a long time ago, before dams, this thing covered when it flooded, it covered literally miles left and right, not just north and south, miles and miles of backwater, and you know, crazy floods and all that stuff. And we've kind of tamed it down. Now, did the catfish forget about those days when it was like crazy survival days? Nope. They didn't forget about it at all, because they could have been up in the flood backwaters. When that water goes down a foot in one day, they skedaddle back to that main river. Yeah, that's right. And so, you know, a lot of the things that we're talking about are just understanding the root equation of current, depth, and cover for time of year, the species of catfish, and their biological nature. And then trying to say, okay, are we right about it? Well, I think for the most part we are. There's things we will never know, but you know, looking for the evidence on the end of your rod, and and I will say this to you guys at home and Stan, I most likely proved myself wrong more than right, because I'd get a theory, something I believed was happening based on my small amount of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, I'm like, that's not what's happening at all. This is what's happening after I got to experience it time and time again. And then there'd be like eye-opening moments where you're like, oh no, that's no, that's not, I and yeah, I did. I proved myself wrong.
Tim, we all are at different levels of that. With spending time on the water, you get, you'll hear us talking about, along with the current thing, we kind of use that to determine what section of the river we're going to fish, and for certain conditions and certain water. And that brings me a question that Stan 3 wanted me to ask. We know we're going to fish, say, the city after we get rain, the water level comes up, we fish up the city. Now, how far will blue cats, like if it's just, we haven't had rain for a bit and it's just normal river flow, you might as well, you got to go downriver.
Okay, so what's interesting about that, and I'm just going to say this one, is that on the Mississippi where I fish, where you have dams, they actually travel through dams better in normal water than high water. But on free flowing, they seem to travel better in not crazy flooded, but a little bit higher than your normal flow. Because ours, it takes kind of a gentle flow, because those dams are kind of a clam thing. Okay, the top one comes down like this. So when they're open like that, and there's just a absolute torrent of water going through there, they just don't seem to make it upstream. Big ones don't make it upstream. Little ones do, 20s, 30s, 40s, but there's a lack of 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s upstream if you've had exorbitantly high water in that early part. So if I'm going to fish August at Keokuk, I need to see one thing. I need to see decent, stable water, no crazy high water early in the year, so May, June, July. I want to see those just normal water. Then I'll go to Keokuk for big fish. But I'm not going to Keokuk if we've had that situation. I am going all the way down to St. Louis. Just is what it is, because I have went to Keokuk too many times when it's been high water and there's a lack of big fish up there. So go ahead, Stan. Sorry, I didn't.
Well, here's the question. Like we used it. We had rain last week. Over the weekend, we fished upriver, up by the city. We did pretty well on Saturday, and on Sunday, we ended up getting the Team Sagging Whistler. Dustin got his PB up there, up in Richmond.
Yep.
How far will blue cats travel? Because it seems like when it goes back down to normal flow, normal conditions, like that whole section, I'm talking miles of river will be, Yeah. But we get a decent rain, a day or two of rain, the water levels come up, and all of a sudden that whole stretch up there is on fire.
Okay, so one thing that the East Coast guys got to realize, this is first and foremost, you guys have usually a very uncharacteristically blue cat water up above in the shallows. Same thing on the Potomac. So as soon as you get, I don't know, to the mountain or whatever, it goes to, narrow. Yours goes to not only narrow, but to shallow. So you're flathead and channel cat water above the falls. If it stays higher, but not like torrent high, they're still going to go above the falls. They're going to search around. But as soon as that water starts dropping, they're down. Because it's fight or flight, buddy. They're and what we'll tell you is there's a lot of anglers up there that are fishing. Not a lot for blue cats, but there's catfishermen up there, and there's guys doing how many 50s and 60s do you hear above the falls? That's what you got to ask yourself. If you do, that means there's a stretch of deep water that's holding them. If there is no deep water, they'll usually, as soon as that water starts to come down, they'll beat feet back down to the deep water. Now, the one thing that you guys also have is you have an absorbently high population for relatively short body of water from Blue Cat standards. So you got Blue Cat standards from below Richmond down to the salt line, basically, and a little bit below that. What is that, 30 miles?
I think it was more like 40-something miles, but
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. 40 miles is like one pool on the Mississippi, you know, from dam to dam. That's usually about a pool, 28 to 40 miles. Now, just that salt water that's at the end brings in so many bait fish. It's so prolific. You've got eels. You've got. It wouldn't surprise me if you don't have, you know, like actual saltwater herring that come up there. Not even the kinds that you guys catch, but other ones and blue bass.
You have the bunker. You have menhead, and you have you got mullet that come up. Schools mullet.
Yep.
We get mullet all the way up to Richmond now.
Yeah, shrimp, crabs.
Crab. We got blue crab all the way up to Richmond.
Yeah.
And
so that
blue cats love blue crab.
yes, that is going to support an enormous number and size of blue cats. It is. The Mississippi, believe this or not, is not as prolific on numbers as what a guy would think. Like I could go 5 miles and not mark 50 fish. So knowing that, it's not artificial, Stan, but the mother river that all blue cats came from was the Mississippi. They've still got their same inherited instincts because that just doesn't fall out of them in 25 years. So blue cats from Mississippi, or basically it wouldn't matter if it was from the Red River of Oklahoma, wherever they got them, they put them into the James, and they put them into the Potomac, and they put them into the Chickahominy, and they put them into power plant lakes and all that. So they're all basically acting the same. But the one thing we have to remember is that when you have high density populations, that's when things start to get a little goofy, because now they're forced to do things out of survival. So that is one of the things when people tell me that they've been catching blue cats in 1 foot of water, eating crabs underneath a light in January, I don't actually doubt it, because I'm like, holy moly. Now, if they would have said, hey, I'm down there at St. Louis and these things are in 1 foot of water and they're eating mayflies, I'd be like, all right, I probably wouldn't believe that. But when you guys tell me about something, you guys are honest, I'm like, that doesn't surprise me, because one thing about behavioral changes is insert a whole bunch of competition, and now they can't be all doing the same thing. They got to do all this other crazy stuff. You know, they just do. But one thing, if the big fish can actually maintain their preferred behavior and habitat, they will. Now, does somebody catch a 52 above the falls? Probably. They probably could. They probably catch them up a creek at some point. But it's not something I'm going to hedge my bets on where I'm at. Now, maybe if I had the same experience of you guys, I caught a 52 in December at the falls once the water was up a little bit, but yet when the water's down, I don't catch any. There's nothing wrong with going after the same thing and hoping for the same results. Nothing wrong with that.
And that was one of the points I was bringing up before, where you can do your own, we can all do our own, when you come up with a theory and it works.
Yes.
Now, granted, you got to kind of replicate those same conditions.
Yeah.
And then you'll start to see exactly, we've thought of other reasons, other things it could have been, but that seems to be the main one, is the water, just the the water flow, the amount of water that's coming down.
And Stan, you're absolutely right. The water flow is your number one common denominator on behavior of blue cats in rivers. It just is. Number one.
All right, Fish and Fever, great to see you. But so how far will they travel? Miles?
Oh yeah. Well, we know that they'll travel as far up the Missouri in as little as a month of several hundred miles.
There you go.
In the right water conditions. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating. There's been a few of them that have went 450 miles. Crazy stuff. You know, they've migrated from where I live clear down to Creoles in less than 30 days.
Yeah. And, you know, you were talking before the competition. I think that's where you see when you have all that competition. You know, luckily we're blessed here on the James, like you were talking about before, with all that different food sources.
Yes.
You know, we have gizzard shad, huge population of gizzard shad year round, and, you know, 20-inch gizzard shad. It's crazy. Yeah. So they have that year round. But when you have the high competition, I think that's when you see those other baits like the chicken and all the other stuff. I think, in my opinion, that's when those work better. And, you know, we've talked about that before. You know, there's going to be anomalies and certain things that in certain bodies of water are going to work better. So, you know.
And honestly, folks that are watching, if I don't have a whole lot of belief in it, doesn't mean you shouldn't. Okay? It doesn't mean that I'm off as far as what I do and where I'm at. But mine is more of a... You guys hear me talk about deep water a lot. You hear me talk about donkey baits a lot and all this stuff. Well, we just so happen to have a big population of deep water bait fish up here. We don't have a lot of skipjacks like the Tennessee because it's not a clear water river where we're at. It's really muddy, and the skipjacks just don't do that good. So our basic forage is going to hang around on the bottom, and a lot of times they're going to hang around on the bottom a lot. Our bait fish don't even like moon eye. They don't even like light at all. They're either underneath barges or they're in deep water or they're in real stained muddy water. And I will mark just scads of moon eye hanging on a 30-foot deep ledge or a 40-foot deep ledge or in the basin at 60 foot just on the side of the ledge. It looks like a carpet of blue. They're down there. You know, suckers, you know that suckers are on pretty much all rivers that were connected to the Mississippi, and there's even some out by you, you know, things like that. So just remember one thing. Just figure out what works for you. Figure out why it works for you if that's what you like. But try to repeat it. Try to, like you said earlier, Stan, try to find the right water conditions so that you can, and really, it doesn't really matter except for none of us have a whole lot of time anymore. I mean, I used to have a whole bunch of time, so I had the luxury to make mistakes. I don't have the luxury to make a bunch of mistakes by not have been paying attention. If I started fishing like 5 years ago, I wouldn't even begin to understand what I understand now. I wouldn't, because I wouldn't have had that synchronicity of being able to go time and time and day. You know, shoot, I was a guide for probably 10 years. So, you know, those things like that. And that's why I like to share it, because I just know people don't have the time to do that.
Well, that's why I think, you know, we've talked about this before. I mean, I think that's why you see people nowadays. Before, the only way you could learn things really was you would hear certain things and you go out and fish. But now you can literally at home watch hours and hours of people fishing.
Yes.
And you can see different. You can actually see it for yourself in use, and then you can kind of say, okay, well, my river or where I fish is kind of similar to that, and when they were doing this, it worked for them there. So let me try to put this in those same conditions in my water. Let me just maybe change it a little bit, but then I can try that there. And I think that knocks out a lot of unproductive things because you see the things that are working in other places, and you can kind of, structure it for where you're fishing. So I think a lot of that wasted time in those wasted areas, I think we don't hit it as much now because you've got so many different ways to see it. So we don't have to waste our time doing it.
And I don't think I would take any of my experiences back, even the days when I would go somewhere and throw a net and try to get bait, and the only thing in there was carp and gar and buffalo, and I was fishing carp and gar water and all that stuff. I wouldn't take any of it back because I learned, it really imprinted in my head. I'm like, oh no, carp and gar water, no, I can catch a few catfish there. I'm going to have to deal with gar, and I haven't had a gar bite for 15 years, literally, because I fish a river that it's drastic enough that gar they don't intersect with blue cats or flatheads or channel cats where I choose to fish. There are areas that do, but as far as catching turtles, I don't catch turtles. I don't get bites from turtles. And I used to say this a long time ago to people when I was answering questions back. I mean, really a long way back. They're like, "Well, I've got this problem with gar." I said, "Well, if you got a problem with gar, your water's too slow." Now, maybe that's all you got. Maybe that's all you got. But really, if you're getting gar bites, your water's too slow, unless you happen to be on the Brazos or something out down in Texas where the alligator gar are running around and that's all you got. You're trying to catch catfish and you get a 7-foot alligator gar. Well, okay, don't break my heart, but I think that would be a fine thing if I was fishing carp and gar water up here, caught a few good flatheads and an occasional 7-foot alligator gar. But ours are, they're 3 foot and 4 foot and stuff like that.
My wife was just mentioning to me that fish that I showed on the 60-something that Stan 3 got a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Trying to find bait. So he was up doing, searching the shallows and things like that. Anyways, came in with a couple of gar and fishing in those areas, nothing. He didn't get that big fish till he went back out into the main channel in the main hole in that main channel.
No,
where
I'm not. There's no absolutes in fishing. None. You could catch a giant fish in the weirdest spot ever, but it's going to happen once. You catch a 80-pound flathead up next to the willow trees in 3 foot of water, or a 1.5 feet of water, once or twice. You're not going to be able to go out there and consistently reproduce it. And the reason I know, and unless your river has such a population that they're pushed into doing things they don't normally do. When catfish have the choice of habitat, because a lot of the other habitat is empty, you'll find the true nature of catfish that way. But if you're fishing like an artificially stocked lake or something like that, you won't find the true nature of catfish. You got to go to those tough rivers, the ones that don't have a huge population. And you see Stan, there's 25-foot ledges with sweeping current on the Mississippi. They don't have a fish more than 6 pounds on them ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And they're a quarter mile long, and they have structure, and they have this and they have that, but the population isn't such that they have to opt for lesser than what they truly want, so that they can actually go to where they want. That will tell you the true nature of catfish.
Well said. Well,
and there's a reason why tournament guys are very successful just fishing, because they're forced to look at all different kinds of situations. And it doesn't matter what tournament guy, they've been skunked before, and that's embarrassing. I don't care who you are. And you're like, oh, geez, I don't want to go that way in. We only got 9 pounds of fish, but you go with your 9 pounds, you get third place. And you're like, huh, maybe the fishing wasn't so easy today.
Well,
I mean, I've heard that story 100 times.
And Tim, one of the things I know we've talked about also with, the YouTube and things like that is it's amazing how many times across the country. Now you'll have that one river that night that might, get a few fish, but across the country from Mississippi to the East Coast, and everybody's having a terrible night.
Yep, it's all shut down. And
other times you'll see they're all on fire, and you'll notice at times where there'll be nothing, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 at different rivers, you get 4 or 5 bites within minutes of each other.
Yeah, like for some reason the bite window is the same 6 states away. Yeah. All right, Stan, it's 9 o'clock. Let's think about wrapping this thing. I used to be able to stay up late, but these days I got to work a lot more. So,
yes. Well, let's see. Yep. Hey, Solo Texan, how you doing? Good to see you. Daniel's out there. Muskrat Adventures. Hilljack. Hilljack said the monster hunt this year, for example. Yep.
Yes. Yep.
Well, we have made it over 2 hours. So, Tim, thank you very much. As always, it's always great talking catfish with you.
Thanks for asking me on. I just love it all.
Yeah, I know it's been a double duty week for you. You were, for anybody that missed it, Epic was on Muskrat Adventure Creole on Tuesday night, 8 p.m. That was a great show. So definitely go, if you didn't see that, go back and watch that. A lot of great topics were talked about. If you missed some of tonight, go back in, and have your questions. If you have questions, we love answering them. And when Epic's on, he loves answering them.
I like asking them too, because I can't fish everywhere. I think everybody's fishing situation is unique to a certain point and interesting. I just think it's great.
Well, with that being said, since Sunday is Christmas, we are not fishing this week. We are taking this Sunday off. So we'll be back next week. But so Tim, thank you very much. Everybody out there, thank you for coming in and hanging out the 2 hours with us. We had like 60 people for the whole night. So thank you very much. Awesome. From the bottom of my heart, Merry Christmas to everybody out there.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you all for being a big part of Two Stands Fishing. We appreciate it. And with that being said, we're jumping out. Deuces.